Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and in an earlier video, part 1, I showed you that I have a Penn Seaboy 190 that I bought online, and the reel was frozen, and with good reason. We found out that the Pinion Gear had seized on this, and it was in all likelihood because the reel had not been properly maintained, probably taken fishing only once or twice, never lubed or oiled, and when we picked it up inside, we see all of the grease that was in this reel was coagulated. The Pinion Gear had seized onto the shaft, and we worked on how to free that Pinion Gear up, which you can see is turning now, by using heat. And if you want, you can go onto my channel and see the other one, but if you use a propane torch and you apply modest heat to this, hold the plate with pliers or something, because it's going to be hot, and use your handle to turn it. You can work it free between the heat and some penetrating oil. In this case, I used WD-40. So I'm going to continue on this video showing you how to replace this, or at least service it. In this case, I don't believe it needs to be replaced, but I will show you how to take this off. Service the inside, because that's probably why it's seized, because nobody was putting oil inside here. Then we'll go clean up the rest of this side plate, and we will restore this reel to fishing condition. So let's get started on this Pinion Gear. And this Pinion Gear has a little hold fast, or a pin, that actually rides in a groove on the inside of this. I think I showed you that I had a spare one of these, and you'll notice there's a couple of flutes here. That pin rides in this flute to hold the gear onto the bridge plate assembly. In order to remove that, I have a pin. You could probably use a little finishing nail or something else, but in this case, I'm going to use that pin. And you just simply knock it out, or get it started knocking out, and you can see that I've got enough now that I can grab that with the pliers. And this is the pin that holds the gear onto the shaft. Okay, so we're going to put that in here, and then if you're lucky enough, you should be able to pull it off with your hands. Sometimes it's pretty aggressive, and if you can't pull it off with your hand, you may need to use a pliers, or you may need to use a lever or something to move that off. Okay, we can see it was rusted to the shaft here, but that rust should clean up. And the way I'm going to do that, first I'm going to try some steel wool and see if we can't clean it off. And we should be able to. Most of these shafts were either stainless steel or a higher quality steel, so they should be able to clean off. And in this case, that's exactly what's happening there. Now we can also see that it's been not maintained, because there's a lot of corrosion and the like sitting on this brass plate here. So again, another way to clean that off is to use the steel wool. And I like to use a mild abrasive. In this case, I'm going to use a chrome polish to see if I can't take that corrosion off of that. So that's an automotive chrome polish. There are other some minor abrasives on there, and quite honestly, you could just go ahead and use the pure steel wool if you wanted to. But like anything that's mechanical, if you take care of the reel, if you use the oil, if you keep it maintained, these pieces will last a long time. And if you don't, just like an automobile, you're kind of asking for trouble. So this one's cleaning up okay. And I want to pay particular attention to this side of the reel, which has the anti-reverse dog. I want to make sure that it is smooth so that that can function properly. And I want to make sure that to the extent that I could clean that corrosion off of this, that's possible. Okay, so I've showed you steel wool, a chrome polish or a metal polish, and clean up that main shaft. And then what I like to do is clean the inside of this too, because that's where the problem was. So we'll put a little penetrating oil in there, and if you hold your finger on the back of it, and you notice I'm using a latex glove. I always like to do that when I'm working with solvents or cleaning. And then a Q-tip. You can use a Q-tip just to come through there and work out any residual greases that may be in there. And then again on the bottom of this gear, steel wool, where sometimes you can use a light file to make sure that it stays flush and cleans itself off. In that case, we're pretty clean now. And again, if you had some particularly resistant corrosion, you could use that file on the plate as well. Again, be careful when you're doing that. You don't want to go too harsh with it. You'll scar it. Okay, so we got this done. Some people put grease on the shaft. I prefer just to put the oil on there as it came from the factory, and we'll put it on, and you can see it's turning freely now, and this was the cause of why the reel seized. So we're going to go ahead and put that pin back in now, and again there was that little hole. We're going to go put that back into the shaft. And that gets tapped in. I use a brass or a plastic hammer to tap that in. And sometimes the last little finishing piece there just needs to be pressed in with your pliers, just to make sure that it's flush. In this case, it's not quite flush. And it's still not flush. That's important because when you go to put the drag sleeve over it, if it's not flush, the drags are going to catch on it. There you go. I felt it moving. Okay, so then we can put the drags back on. And in this case, this is why I say it hasn't been maintained. These drags they're near new. And interestingly enough, on the Seaboy, even though it's a lower level reel, this has got a Jigmaster size backplating to it, main drive and the like. So we're going to put that over. And sometimes you have to tap that on. I use a wrench sometimes if it's particularly difficult to do. But most of the time they cooperate. Okay, we're on with that. So that runs fabric washer. In these cases, these are needing a little lube, so we're going to go ahead and put a drag grease on there. I use Cal's drag grease. Since I already put the first one in there, I'm going to put the grease on the metal washer, which goes next for that bottom one. Then we're going to go put the second one on. And a healthy dose. You don't want to put too much in because it's going to get squeezed out from operation. Too much may actually act as an impediment, but if you put enough on each side that you can see that you're starting to fill the pores, that's the important one. Okay, fabric washer goes on, then the eared washer goes on next. And it fits in those grooves in the main drag. And then the last one goes on. And again, this reel's hardly been used, and I guess the cause of failure on this one was that probably went on 1 or 2 trips because these drags don't look like they've been used at all. Probably got wet, didn't get maintained at the end of the fishing day, and then was put on a rack or something to just sit there. And that's exactly what we see here. So the first thing I like to do with this, again, I can't overemphasize using these gloves when you're working with solvents. I'm just going to hit that with some WD-40 because I notice there's quite an accumulation of dried grease. I'm also going to take these pieces off. This is the 3-spool transition piece. This is the collar and spool gear. And as you can see, there's just quite a buildup of the grease all around. So this just requires cleaning. The first part can be done sometimes by just scraping off some of the excess, and then we'll make sure it gets cleaned. But this is just accumulated grease. You can see it on the back of this transition piece here. There's just quite a bit of grease here that lost its viscosity or whatever. Okay, and then while I'm at it, I'm going to check to make sure that all the teeth in the spool gear are good. I'm going to go grab that steel wool again. I'm going to go clean these up. And again, it doesn't have to be bright and shiny, but brass and metal does tarnish, but you want to make sure that if there's any corrosion on there, that you get the corrosion off of it, and if there's any buildup of grease and the like, you want to make sure that that comes off as well. So these parts are actually the parts. It's kind of an interesting reel. It's got the side pieces are the Penn 65 Long Beach pieces. The gear itself is the Jigmaster gear, so it's a little bit of higher ratio in the turning. The internals, though, are pretty much stock Penn parts, and you'll find over time that Penn has done this with a lot of reels, using stock parts in different configurations. All right, so there's an accumulation of grease. Look at that! Wow, that's what's been built up and dried up here, which is causing the reel not to work properly. I'm going to hit that again. Grab another Q-tip or cotton swab. Get all of this out of there. And I have no doubt that this reel is going to work just fine. So I bought this as a parts reel. I bought it on eBay. I bought it as a part of a lot of 5 of these. So I'm not quite sure what was going on there. I don't know if some fella just bought them all and had all his poles loaded up that way and just didn't use this one, or if he this one broke or seized after a winter perhaps, and he never got around to getting it repaired or what. But I can be honest with you, if you watch the other video in my channel, you'll see all of them were in poor repair. So it could just be a matter that the person thought, okay, it's a lower cost reel, and treat it as a fashion statement. As long as it lasts, fine. If it doesn't, I'll go replace it. I don't know, but regardless, I'm sure we're going to make this one work again. Okay, to put this reel back together, those springs go in. Then we're going to lubricate, as we should have done all along with this. I use a blue grease. In this case, it's a Penn Reel grease. It's built for reels, and if you get them from the factory, you'll find that Penn is using these to lubricate their factory reels. A little bit on both sides, not too much. So what obviously caused this reel to fail was that it wasn't taken care of and wasn't lubed. One of the other failures that happens with reels is that they're lubed too much, and the lube actually becomes an impediment to good operation. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit on that, and then I'm going to put a little bit on the teeth of this as well, where the gears kind of intersect with the main gear. And then we're going to put that back on the springs. Make sure that when you reassemble the reel that the notch side of the spool gear is up. I'm going to reinsert the transition piece from the free spool lever to the main gear side, and this is ready to go back together. So there's 4 side plate screws that attach the bridge. Pull those out of my parts basket right now. You'll notice that on the bridge screws, one of them has got a partial thread and the other is a full thread. The partial threads go on the top, the fully threaded ones go on the bottom, and the fully threaded ones actually control the dog. So you notice I just inserted it. I've turned the bridge about a quarter of a turn. I'm going to bring in the threaded one on the right hand side if you're looking at it from this. And this is where the dog assembly gets attached. And the dog assembly is the anti-reverse dog. Without this, the reel will backpedal and will not stay set on a strike. So you have that, and then you have a small spring which rides in this crevice here, and that's how you keep the tension on that anti-reverse dog. If parts were needed for this, parts are still available. You can get those parts from pennparts.com. Okay, once that's been completed, I turn it another quarter of a turn, line the screw up with the bridge plate, and a partial turn there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert the other 4. I do that in a cross X pattern. That way it keeps proper tension on these. This one would go through the screw, so this is the one that's partially threaded. I'm going to put the one on the other bottom now. And then I'll come back and do the other side. And then we'll put the other partially threaded one up top, which goes through that screw plate. And then we're going to tighten them all down once we have all 4 of them set. Don't over tighten, there's no reason to, just make sure that they're secure. And then let's turn this thing and see if we've been successful. We have been successful. This is turning the way it should. It's looking ugly, but looks deceptive. This should work fine. Alright, so while we're at it, we want to make sure that we put some lubrication on that spool carrier on the back there. Again, that's grease. Some people ask what do you grease and what do you oil? I oil bearings and I grease moving parts like these. Then we're going to just insert the ferrule here. This is what presses down on the drags to make sure that the drags work properly. That fits over the sleeve. I'm going to clean this up a little bit on this star gear, again with my steel wool and chrome polish, metal polish cleaner. And that's an automotive product. That one happens to be turtle wax, but again, any metal cleaners generally are a mild abrasive and can be used. And then I'm going to set that on top. Okay, and then if it's spinning, typically what I do is just hold the pinion gear down. Oh, I don't have that seated properly. There we go. If you hold the pinion gear in place, then you can more easily turn this until you have enough room that you can put your handle on there if necessary. Okay, so there we go. So this one is going to go back into service. Now there's other things I need to do with this reel. First, this spool is showing all of the bad grease. Again, a little WD-40 on there. I'm going to try a paper towel first. That seems to have cleaned it up. And then a little bit of steel wool on that section here, which is going to go into the main gear assembly. I'll make sure that's nice and clean. Sometimes just clean off any issues that are there. It's not terribly difficult to do, but you know, clean reels are good reels. And then a little bit of lubrication on that section. I'm going to pull this out for a moment because there's another bearing in here, or side plate. I want to make sure that I get all of that cleaned up because we know that this was not a well-maintained reel. And put some on that spool carrier side there as well as on the clicker. If you want to, you can clean this post-corrosion up. I'll come back to that at a later time. But for the purposes of this video, just to show you, we'll reseat the spool. The spool carrying gear has been over-tightened, so we're going to back that off. And we'll bring this plate over to the side here. And we're going to reinsert the side plate screws now. There's a carrier piece that holds the gear in underneath here, so you want to bring these up. This is only common to the Seaboy. If you're using a Jigmaster or another one with a higher speed, you'll find that there's a chrome ring that comes on the inside and serves the same purpose. In that case, like the 309, which is a level wind reel that uses a similar construction, you're going to want to remove the chrome ring to take it off, and then when you reinstall, the chrome ring is going to need to go back on. Okay, so we're pretty set there. I just heard those click in, so we'll tighten that down now. Now those are short screws. There's two different types of screws on a side plate for these. The longer screws go into the crossbars, the shorter screws go into the reel seat. If you swap them out, if you aren't paying attention and the long screws wind up on the bottom, they do have a tendency to snag lines. So you don't want them sticking out, and in order to avoid that, the smaller ones go on the bottom. Much the same as that little thing we were going with there on the partially threaded versus fully threaded bridge screw. So there's a method to why Penn does it that way, and if you're repairing a reel, you should do it that way as well. Okay, so the 4 of the side plates are back in now. Quick check here just to make sure that it's doing what we want it to do. The spool is spinning freely. Look at that, right? What? That's one of those things that if you work on reels, makes you feel good that you got it done properly. I'm just going to clean this up again. This is an aluminum handle, so you can see how they gave up some of the quality there. I think it's aluminum. It looks that way. There's some crud on the back from this repair, right? Clean that up as best we can. Put this back on. Put a drop of oil. I use Reelex oil in the pinion shaft, which is where it's seized to begin with, because nobody put any oil in there. We're going to put that service nut back on. That handle nut will hold tight. Go ahead and use our reel nut tightener to do that. Rear wrench. And if you were in a pinch, if you were doing this and don't have the wrenches, I guess you could use a pliers. I'm kind of against pliering any kind of nuts in that, but in a pinch it could work. And then the last piece is the set screw here. So that sits in a preset hole in the handle. Those of you that watch my videos know I have a little bit of trouble with the smaller pieces and parts. Patience is kind of the operative word there, but eventually I do get these things in there. I suspect you'll be a little bit better at it than I will, but that's my little cross to bear. Okay, so we're back there. Tighten down the drags, turn the reel, and boy, for an $8 reel that I picked up on eBay that required some service, a little bit of knowledge goes a long way in terms of making this reel functional, and it'll be ready to go back into service and fish for a lot more years. And I hope whoever buys this heeds my advice about keeping it well maintained. All right, so I hope that's helped you. The tips, really, the operative tips on the other one was if you have a seized reel, heat oftentimes will help fix that. The precautionary words were keep the reel maintained and oiled at all times. That'll prevent the seizure to begin with. And you learned something here about the Seaboy 190 having the gearing of a Penn Jigmaster, having a lot of the shared components with the Long Beach 65, and a little bit of the narrative history between the Seaboys of earlier and the Seaboys that were later on in design. So I hope that's helped. If you've enjoyed the video, subscribe to my channel. You'll see other videos like this. If you like this particular one but don't care to subscribe, then just simply indicate that you like the video. I answer all comments and questions, so if you have any questions or a few suggestions on how to help me improve these, then I welcome those. So this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackles, thanking you for viewing the video, and hope you've enjoyed it.